Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We're Andy and Imi. We've been together for 6 years. We love each other to bits.
We date and sleep with women together, exploring BDSM, kink, and spreading good vibes along the way.
And we're hopefully here to improve your life along the way. So today's video was inspired by a girl that Imi and I have been talking to and we're about to go on a date with, who was trying to figure out if some of the types of partners that she's been seeking for casual relationships and for BDSM and the type of sex that she was seeking was actually good for her and adding to her life or not. And she said, I'm trying to push my own boundaries without pushing too far that I neglect my own needs, I suppose. So we're going to discuss how to know whether or not a partner is good for you, whether that's a casual relationship, a serious relationship, just a sex partner or BDSM. And all of this obviously applies to all the different types of relationships that you might get into.
Especially for BDSM sex, where the sex itself can be very intense and it can feel great in the moment when you're caught up in the pleasure of it all, but afterwards you can be not quite sure whether it was actually good for you.
And let's make this clear, none of this video is going to be the definitive answer. It's not up to us to tell you who you have in your life, who you have sex with, or who you be in a relationship with. This is just us giving you some starting points to sort of get your brain thinking, some things to think about, how to figure out whether or not that relationship is adding to your life. And that's a pretty decent place to start with. You can basically ask yourself the question, is this person adding to my life, or do I feel like they're taking away from it? Basically, do I feel like they're a net positive on my life?
And this is something that I think you've talked about with a lot of things, like any sort of relationship, whether that's friendship or even like keeping family members in your life, asking the question like, are they adding to my life? Am I adding to their life? Am I happier for it? Are they happier for it? Just asking those general questions. Really basic questions. And I think often your intuition, like your gut, seems to know a very quick answer to it if you actually let that part of yourself speak out. But I think often you can have lots of thoughts or things that conflict or concerns or like all of these thoughts going on in your head that can confuse it and make a decision more complicated. But I think if you take a moment, stop, get in touch with yourself, you generally know when something is or is not good for you.
Yeah, and we're going to give a lot more answers in this video, but that's a really good place to start with. You're basically asking the question of, am I happy? And I like that you also talked about the other side, which is, are they happy? Am I adding to their life? Is this relationship or is this sexual partner, is this sex that we're having, adding to my life and adding to theirs? Am I happy and are they happy?
Yeah, because as you might guess, if the other person in the relationship isn't very happy, it can be hard to have a good relationship. It does take two people to have a relationship.
Yeah, our motto is kind of, rather than looking at someone else to complete you, kind of like what Hollywood and Disney and all of that talk about, where they're like, I'm going to find my soulmate, I'm going to find the one, and they're going to bring me happiness and complete me. We like to look at it as, you want to be a complete person yourself, you want to be happy in yourself, you want to like yourself and maybe even love yourself, and then someone else comes into your life and adds to that. And then the same for your partners that you seek out. Try and, if you can, seek out partners who seem to be complete or relatively complete. Maybe they've got some things they're working on and all of that, but they're not looking to you to be the sole source of their happiness and to sort of fix the holes in their life or bring them happiness when without you, they wouldn't have any happiness. And that's a pretty good next question to ask yourself. You can kind of take a little bit of time and say to yourself, would I be happier if I was single? And if the answer is yes, then perhaps that isn't a partner that you want to be with, or maybe you want to improve the relationship or whatever, it's up to you what you choose to do with it. But that's a really nice starting point. Do I think that I would be happier if I was actually single?
And maybe a caveat I would add to that as well is that obviously I think when breaking up with anybody, there can be a bit of pain in that. So maybe not necessarily focusing on the immediate what's it going to feel like if they're not in my life, but more if I've moved on, if I've taken the time to do the things that I want to do or focus on myself or do the things that typically comes with being single, then would I be happier?
Yeah.
Because obviously breakups can be painful and there can be lots of emotions in breakups. But my understanding of what you're saying is that it's focusing on what would my life look like if they weren't in it.
Yeah, and similar to that, I love what you just said there. You can also ask yourself the question of, do I feel like my life would be more free if I was single? Do I feel like I would have the freedom to be my authentic self, that I would get to choose what I do and how I spend my time and who I spend my time with? We're going to talk about what to do if you feel like maybe a relationship is feeling a little bit controlling. We'll deal with that in a second, but that's a really nice starting point. Do I feel like I would be happier if I was by myself or maybe with someone else? And do I feel like I would have a little bit more freedom to be myself and the most authentic version of myself, whatever that might be for you? And especially if we're talking like BDSM partners or just like a sexual partner where you guys do a little bit of like kinky stuff. You know, a lot of this channel, we do talk about BDSM. We talk about other stuff as well, but we cover BDSM a fair bit. And sometimes the sex can be very intense with BDSM and with kink and stuff like that. And so if you're sitting there trying to figure out if a relationship is adding to your life, I'd take a little bit of space, maybe the next day or over the next couple of days, go sort of be by yourself and spend some time alone and just sort of notice the thoughts that you're having, the feelings that you're having, you know, maybe the thoughts that are in your head. And you can keep a journal of that if you want to. That's something that I know people do with like BDSM. They'll keep a BDSM journal of how they're feeling afterwards and whether or not they think that it's positive or whether they think it's maybe taking away from their life. But spend a bit of time outside of the sex by yourself if you're having these sort of concerns of, I don't know if this relationship is good for you.
Yeah, I guess because I spoke a little bit before about getting in touch with yourself, or I or we like to call it the inner knower. But if that's not something you've practiced, that may actually be quite challenging. If you've never really tried to listen to your internal voice before, like your internal voice, not all the thoughts that are kind of bouncing around in your head. And as you said, journaling can be a really good way to do that. Having some space to yourself, I find getting out into nature and just removing some of the distractions around you can give you a bit of clarity. A lot of the time, it just comes down to slowing down a little bit, taking some time to feel.
Yeah, and along with that is detaching or letting go of, or even just noticing some of the thoughts that might be in your head that maybe, I'll phrase it like this, maybe those thoughts didn't necessarily come from you. It's more like guilt tripping from other people or shaming from other people, things that you think you should do. You know, I should be a good partner and stick with someone and be loyal even if I'm not happy. You know, for a lot of women, maybe they feel like I should just be a good submissive. If we're talking about BDSM especially, I should be a good submissive and just shut up and deal with it. You know, if you're a guy, a lot of guys feel this pressure to just shut up and be unhappy. You know, I'm supposed to just be the cog in the machine. I'm supposed to just deal with it and keep a stiff upper lip. All of that stuff isn't necessarily you listening to yourself. It's almost like we said, guilt tripping and rules and stuff from other people. And that can be a little bit of a process to untangle that and figure out what you actually think instead of what other people want you to think or what other people want you to do or what you think is right or correct or like what society wants you to do and all of that. It's almost like letting go of that and saying, no, what do I actually want? Because at the end of the day, this is your life. That's why we said it's not up to Imi or me to tell you what to do. But you're going to get towards the end of your life. And if you've lived a life that's true to yourself, you'll probably be happy. But if you've followed your whole life just doing what other people want you to do and doing what people think you should do, man, that can just lead to a life of regret and a feeling of I wasn't my authentic self because I was too scared of people disapproving of me. So that can take a little bit of practice, but yeah, listening to that inner voice inside you that knows whether or not it's happy or not and knows whether or not it's being authentic and having integrity or not.
And another way to get some guidance, obviously, you spoke about how external input can make things more difficult. It can also be helpful.
Yep.
If you have people that you trust, whether that's friends, family, a therapist, some sort of support network where you can get a little bit of external guidance, that can also be a helpful thing. And it's definitely worth adding in the caveat of like everybody that you speak to, they're going to have their own belief systems and rule books
And
and
opinions.
preferences, and they might believe things or feel things or have preferences that you don't have. And so keep in mind that any guidance from another person is going to be skewed by them just being somebody that's
They're
different
going
to
to
you.
be biased because they're not you. Yeah.
But at the same time, if you do have people that care about you, and I guess if you're coming to them and their only interest is making sure that you're happy and okay, it might be worth seeking a little bit of guidance from them, or that is at least an option.
Yeah, and that's something that like even you've done and I've done too many times in the past where especially in the first few years we were both trying to figure out who we are and what we want. I spoke to a lot of my friends to say, do I think this relationship is good for me? Do I think it's adding to my life? You spoke to lots of your friends. You also have spoken to your spiritual, or I guess our spiritual coach, Keith, and he's sort of done that with you, helped you figure out what you want from the relationship, whether or not it's adding all the things that you want. And yeah, if you're happy, basically. So get some outside input for sure.
And I will also mention my personal experience is that sometimes people will say things that you don't want to hear, or they will give you guidance that you don't find helpful. And that's okay too. Like, people aren't always going to feed you the exact thing that you want to hear. Sometimes that can be a good thing. Sometimes it might not feel so helpful, but it's at least an option. And if anything, it can sometimes help you feel like you're supported, like you're not so alone in making these decisions. And
Feel heard. Yeah.
yeah, it's not such like a confusing, isolated place when you're trying to figure out some things.
Yeah, for sure. And like as an example, if any of you listening do happen to be into some BDSM or some kink, you might open up to friends or family and say, hey, I'm in this relationship. I'm just trying to figure out if it adds to my life or not, or I'm trying to figure out if I want to like keep building with this person or if I want to go elsewhere. And maybe you mentioned the BDSM and the kink. Some people will have all sorts of like connotations around what BDSM might be. You know, I've met people like that in my life. You definitely have, as we'll talk about in a second. And they might have assumptions. They might go, oh shit, BDSM is bad. That means they're mistreating you and abusing you. And you had exactly that. When your older sister found out that we engage in some BDSM play, she had all sorts of assumptions of, oh my God, he's abusing you, he's hitting you, 50 Shades of Grey, all of that kind of stuff. And so take that with a grain of salt. Like, sometimes people might have assumptions, and that's okay. It can still help to, if you want to and if you trust people, get some of those outside influences. And ultimately, maybe I'll let you speak on this, even though your sister was like, oh my God, he's abusing you, stop. The underlying message underneath her like shame and her fear and her judgment and her like concern about you is exactly that, concern about you, which means she loves you. She cares about you. And so even if someone is judgmental about your relationship or your partner or something like that, and maybe you don't want to hear it, you can look underneath that and say, they probably care about me, or they wouldn't have even said this in the first place. The fact that they are being judgmental means that they probably care about me. They probably love me and they probably want me to be happy.
Yeah, and in my particular case, there's a bit more context to it all. But
Sure.
as you were saying, the sense was that she did care about me, and I did from that point in time was like, okay, I'm probably, if I am having questions about the relationship or wanting to talk through some things, especially if things feel like they're not going perfectly and I want to talk that out, then she's not going to be the person that I go to, because she definitely already had some preconceived notions about it all. But when we have been working through things in the relationship, or I have been questioning things, I've had friends and family as well who are more neutral parties, or maybe don't insert their opinion as
They
aggressively.
might have an opinion, but they just sort of like keep it a little bit more to themselves and listen. Yeah, and you can even kind of think, if you go to a partner or a friend or like you go to someone else and say, hey, I'm trying to just figure out my relationship. If they don't necessarily listen in a way that you feel is helpful to you, isn't that amazing? You've figured out, hey, I just won't go to that person for relationship advice. Amazing. That frees you up to then try the next person. In other words, what we're saying here is you might have to try a few different people if this is something that you're, wanting to talk about. And the same thing applies to therapists and counselors and psychologists. A lot of people just assume I will go to one therapist and they'll be perfect and they're good at it and it's their job. No, understand that therapists are human beings, and human beings are all over the bell curve. You have really terrible psychologists, you have average psychologists, and you have really great ones. You might have to play the numbers game a little bit and talk to a few different psychologists before you find one who actually gives you the advice that you feel is helpful. I myself, in my early years when I was getting over my depression, the first therapist I ever went to was so unbelievably judgmental about some of the things that I brought up. And I went into that therapy session with my mother, and my mother was right there holding my hand basically the entire time. Basically, this guy was really, really, really judgmental. And we leave the therapy session, and before I've even had a chance to say anything to my mother, she says, we're never going back there again. And I was like, okay, so it wasn't just me that was crazy. Like, he really was I'll phrase this in a nice way. He wasn't the best therapist that I ever could have had. And then the very next therapist that I went to was absolutely loving, kind, changed my life in so many different ways. So you might have to shop around. The same thing with friends.
Other questions that you can ask yourself when it comes to more sex-specific boundaries is, if your partner and you are in the middle of sex, do they stop if you ask them to stop? Or if you ask them to slow down, do they slow down? Are they listening to you when you ask for something in particular?
Yeah, basically, do they respect your boundaries? That feels like a big one. But I think often we might have strong feelings for someone, or we might really love them, or just the sex might be amazing. But maybe there's some like lack of respecting of boundaries, or maybe they have some controlling behavior, and we'll talk about that in a second. Maybe they're like really jealous and sort of exert that in the form of control. But basically starting to ask questions there and saying, am I happy with this in my life? And by the way, that doesn't mean, and nothing that we're saying here today means you have to immediately leave or break up with them. There's things you can do to improve. You can go to couples therapy. You can just sit and talk about it. They can improve if they want to. You can improve if you want to. You can both work on your independence. But these are all just questions to get you starting to think, do I think this relationship is adding to my life? And I feel like controlling behavior or them not respecting boundaries is, maybe it's a red flag, but at least something where maybe it's worth pausing for thought and saying, do I want this relationship?
And I think part of why we're bringing this up specifically is because some of this we are talking about this in the context of like a BDSM dynamic where there is power play, and sometimes like a no isn't clearly a no, or it might be easier to push the boundary of a no or slow down or whatever that might be.
Part of BDSM can be like exploring boundaries and seeing what you're into. Yeah.
Yeah, and one person inherently has, I wouldn't even say more control, but because they're in the dominant position, they are able to guide things more, and it might be easier for them to push boundaries in contrast to maybe like a more vanilla relationship.
You're both turned on, you're horny, you're in the middle of things, and maybe you go a little bit too far sometimes with boundaries during BDSM. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it becomes more of a grey area, and I think it becomes even more important that you are listened to. Those boundaries are heard and respected.
Yeah, and if we're talking specifically about BDSM, and again, I'll say this for the 1000th time, this video applies to BDSM and casual relationships and hardcore, serious, deep, monogamous relationships. So we're talking about all relationships here. But with the context of BDSM and sex, another thing to sort of think about is, what is the aftercare like? And so aftercare is basically kind of just, do we cuddle after sex? Do we do a little wind down and we hang out and we get to talk about it and make sure we both had fun and talk about what we like, talk about what we don't like, what we want to try next time? And so in the context of BDSM, I'd say you could kind of phrase it like this. You ask yourself the question, do I feel like my partner wants me to feel good after particularly intense BDSM? Do they want to give me a cuddle and make sure I'm listened to and I feel okay and everything was great and I'm happy and I can have the space to share if I feel like there was something that I want to do different next time or something I didn't enjoy?
Because around the whole conversation of boundaries, I think sometimes it can be misconstrued a little bit or made out to be this very clinical, formal, unsexy thing when it comes to talking about boundaries. Or it can be a bit jarring, like, these are my boundaries and this is what I want and this is not okay. Like, it doesn't have to be some uncomfortable, rigid conversation. As you said, it can be part of the aftercare, or like the wind down after intense sex can just be cuddling and having that gentle conversation and asking questions like, how did you feel? Was that good? Like, how was the
that
intensity?
fun? Yeah.
Did you enjoy
like
yourself?
That? I had fun. And if you want it in an even more casual, chill way, which is usually how we do things, we're not people that have rigid conversations about consent or boundaries or any of that. We do it in a more casual way. Like after sex, we'll just say, hey, I had fun. That was so fun. How do you feel? Was that fun? Is there anything you want to try next time? Is there any parts that you didn't like? We just have a casual conversation. You're basically just saying, I had fun. Did you have fun? You're asking yourself with your current partner, do I feel like they want me to have fun? Do I feel like they care about me having fun? Or are they kind of just trying to take their own pleasure or maybe take a relationship or whatever it is they're trying to get? Are they just taking that and they don't really care if I benefit as well? Like, they don't see it as us in a relationship or a sexual relationship together having fun. They're just kind of trying to get theirs and they don't give a fuck if I get mine. Another question to sort of ask is, does my partner control me only when I want them to? Like in the context of sex, like, they will take the lead, blah, blah, blah. Maybe they will make the decisions if they're the head of the household and I give them that consent. I want them to make the decisions. But then they also stop controlling you as soon as you ask them to, or as soon as you say, I'm not comfortable, can I please make this decision? Or can we stop? So controlling only when you want them to, only when it's fun for you.
Yeah, and maybe an example of that is if you are in a BDSM sort of dynamic and there's dominant and submissive roles, if maybe you're being told to wear a particular thing or perform a certain sex act, obviously part of that power exchange is that the majority of the time you're both agreeing to go along with that. But I think the distinction being that if there is a point in time where you're like, actually, I really don't feel like this for whatever reason today, or like, I'm not comfortable with this.
Yeah, I'm just not in a great mood. I don't want to do this today.
Then having that be heard and respected even though the dynamic usually is, yes, I will listen to what is you want me to do. And sometimes I might even do something for you. And it's part of the submission is that maybe I would do something I wouldn't usually do, but in a way I'm choosing to do something because it makes you happy. Like, so maybe in an example, if the master or the dominant wanted the sub to wear something particularly provocative or exposing, and there might be a level of discomfort there or some insecurity or maybe even just nervousness there, but still kind of pushing past that nervousness because it pleases your partner. Like there can be a pleasure or a pleasant feeling in that, but being very clear that if it is too much, being able to say that and then having that be heard.
And again, all of this applies to normal relationships, not just BDSM. And you don't have to be perfect with all of this. Maybe we could have said this earlier in this podcast, but you and I were not always perfect at respecting each other's boundaries or not being as controlling or not being jealous or not telling the other person what to do. That's something that you can just improve at, particularly if it's a long-term relationship. Like I wasn't always great at respecting your boundaries, and you tried to control a lot of my behavior in the first couple of years. We didn't mean to, but it's something that we got better at over time. And a book that really helps is I Need Your Love. Is That True? By Byron Katie. As an example, one thing that we used to do at the start was I would give you instructions or I would tell you what I liked you to wear. And we did it in the context of like sexual. I wanted you to dress sexy for me. But we got to a point after a couple of years where you were like, sometimes I just want to wear what I want to wear. And that was something we had to sort of, or we chose to sort of figure out together. Okay, like how do we make it so that you tell me if you want me to tell you what to wear, but then when you just want to dress yourself and wear whatever you want, you can just tell me, hey, I'm going to dress myself today. Don't tell me to wear something sexy. I just want to dress by myself. And so that's something that we had to figure out. And the next thing that really helps with figuring out if a relationship is good for you or not, whether it's adding to your life, is, funnily enough, not focusing on the relationship and instead focusing on you. In other words, developing your self-esteem, through self-improvement, through confidence, through independence, through having friends, all of that. So you're then in a better position or a more independent position, a better position to figure out if this person is actually adding to your life. Because if you're not very happy with yourself and you feel like your life kind of sucks, it can be very easy to feel like you need the other person to complete you. Again, all of Hollywood, all of Disney, every freaking book, all of that stuff sells this painful lie that you need someone else to be happy. You need a soulmate, you need a Disney princess or a prince. You need someone else to come along and fulfill the void in your heart. And that's a very painful story or a lie to believe because it leaves you helpless. It leaves you reliant on someone else to fix your life. And if that person ever doesn't want to be with you, or maybe they're not a great match for you, which is what this video is about, figuring out if they are a good match. But if you feel like maybe they're not a good match, you might stay anyway. And I, for the first 2 relationships of my life, stayed in a 6-year relationship that was just not great for me, and I was definitely not great for her. And then I stayed in a 4-year relationship with someone who was not great for me, and I was probably not great for her. And I remember sitting in a park one day, typing out this long text or this letter, basically, this text to my mother that was about like 50 paragraphs detailing, hey, I'm not happy in my relationship. She doesn't mean to, but sometimes my partner gets really angry and she hits me and she's violent and she screams at me and she calls me not a man. And then we have a big fight. And, I've wanted to call the police, but I'm too scared, blah, blah, blah. Like I've wanted to tell you about this, mother, but I've been too scared. I wrote all of that out and I was about to hit the send button, but then I thought, I don't know if I'd be okay without her. And so I didn't send that text message. And so this has got to be maybe the most important part of this podcast is develop your own self-love so that you're not relying on someone else to be or to carry that burden of your happiness. And so if you are in a relationship that you think is not adding to your life, which I was, and I knew that, you will then have the courage to make some changes to either improve the relationship or leave or speak to someone about it or hit send on that text message instead of deleting it. And I guess to give myself credit, I still told her about it like maybe 2 months later. But yeah, you'll have that courage. And that comes from self-love and self-esteem.
Yeah, because as you said, if you don't like yourself very much or you don't think very highly of yourself, it's easy to then take that next step to think that I'm never going to get anybody else. No one else will ever love me.
So
This
therefore, I
is,
have to stay.
yeah, this is the best I can ever get. I don't deserve any more than this. But when you start showing yourself a bit of love and some compassion, I think maybe one of the biggest things is that you just realize that I am allowed to have what I want. Like, if you like yourself and you have love for yourself, you then understand that I'm allowed to have a good relationship. I'm allowed to have a relationship that makes me happy. I deserve a happy life. And from there, it's very natural to be like, okay, well, is there something that I need to cut out of my life in order for me to be happy, or different things that I need to move towards in order for me to have the life that I deserve, I believe that I deserve.
Yeah, basically treating yourself the way that you want others to treat you, or showing yourself compassion in the way that maybe you would show other people compassion. And a very good question to ask yourself when you're trying to figure out if a relationship, again, whether it's a serious relationship or casual or BDSM or whatever, you're trying to figure out if this relationship is good for you, ask yourself, what advice would I give to my best friend? If my best friend was in this exact relationship, if my best friend was me, what would I say to my best friend? Would I say, hey, you're doing okay, stick in the relationship, just keep improving it? Or would I say, do you want to take a break from the relationship? Or would I say, whoa, I really think you should run away from that relationship? Basically, whatever advice you would give your best friend in the exact same relationship, try giving that to yourself.
And while we are talking about building self esteem, one way that you like to give to your clients to help them do that, and an exercise that we've done, and you give it to basically everybody that might seek your guidance on this, is to write out 50 things that are likable about yourself.
Yes, you are
But
literally building self-esteem. That's what that is for.
yeah, you're writing up that list. And I think the number 50 is in some ways important too, because most people can write out five, maybe even 10 things pretty easily. But after, 20, 30 things that you've listed out, you really need to start digging deep and really thinking, like, what
Like,
do I,
who am I as a person and what is likable? Yeah.
yeah, what do I like about myself? What do I have to offer? Like, what do I give
Yeah.
other people? And funnily, I found when I've done this exercise, you start giving yourself a credit for things that you maybe otherwise wouldn't think about. It can be really, really nice to acknowledge the ways that you are a good person, the qualities that you have.
Yeah. And on top of that, you're showing yourself that you're a person who is worthy of a happy relationship that adds to your life. Or even being single and being happier there, because that's an option too. You don't have to just replace this relationship with someone else. You can go be single for a while. I did that. Being single is like absolutely beautiful and amazing. You get to focus on yourself. And so writing down these 50 things that are likable about yourself is you giving yourself that permission to either be with someone else or be by yourself for a little while. You're saying, look at this. I have enough intrinsic qualities that I can either be okay by myself, or I have enough qualities that I could find another partner and find someone who would like me for all of the things on this list. Similarly, something else to help you build that self-love or that self-esteem is reading the book I Need Your Love, Is That True? By Byron Katie. That book is basically a shortcut to building a bit of self-esteem and a bit of self-love. And another exercise that we give a lot of my clients and that we both do a lot is what I call mirror therapy. And this was something that I got from my spiritual coach, Keith. The idea is you go into the bathroom or anywhere that you have a mirror and you look into your own eyes in the mirror. After maybe 10 seconds of gazing into your own eyes, you say, I love you, out loud to yourself in the mirror as you look into your own eyes, and you sort of see what feelings or what thoughts come up. Obviously, be gentle with this one. This can be one where you go and say that and all sorts of emotions come up and you start crying and you go, I don't love myself, I'm a piece of shit. Amazing. That is beautiful, like self-therapy, basically. You can start working on that stuff that comes up, and that's beautiful. Talk to friends about it, talk to a therapist or whatever. But it's basically you seeing how you feel about yourself and then slowly maybe repairing or improving that relationship. If you do this every single day, which is what I do, I've done it every day for probably 2 years at this point. I say I love you to myself in the mirror and I give myself a little smile and I just see how I feel. You build this beautiful relationship where you start to feel like, you know what, maybe I do love myself. Maybe it's okay to love myself. Maybe it's not weird or gay or any of these ideas that might come up. Maybe it's okay for me to like myself. After all, I'm stuck with me for the rest of my life. Wouldn't you want to like the person that you're stuck with forever? Like you are literally with you forever. And most people, I think, don't really love themselves, or they certainly aren't doing the actions of someone who does love themselves. And so if you can get more in touch with your own feelings for yourself, your own self-love and your own self-esteem, and start to, like I said, repair or build that relationship with yourself, man, that goes a hell of a long way to then being in a good position to see or to ask yourself, is this relationship with this other person adding to my life?
And I think the great thing about this technique, a lot of the people that come back to you and say that they've done it, they do find it gets to the heart of what's going on really quickly. Because I think for the majority of people, it's really quite challenging to look yourself in your own. It's a very intimate act, like especially if you do it with another person, but you're basically doing that with yourself to, if you genuinely take a moment to properly look into your eyes and acknowledge the person that's staring back at you,
Yeah.
which is you, I think it can be very deceptively effective very quickly. And sometimes it might it might not make a lot of sense what's coming up, and you might feel a lot of emotions and be confused and be like, where is all of this coming from? I know I have a few times when I've done this technique, but it can be a nice shortcut.
It's very good therapy because, like you said, sometimes you'll go to do it, you'll look into your own eyes in the mirror, you'll try and say, I love you, and you can't do it. And by the way, if you can't say, I love you, that's okay. Try saying, I like you, or you're okay, or you're decent, or something, and then build up to saying, I like you. But when you do this, it is the quickest way to see what comes up and basically see if you're happy with the way that you've been treating yourself and your life. Like if you try and say, I love you to yourself, and your thought comes up of like, I don't love you, you're a piece of shit, or I don't love myself, I'm a piece of shit. Doesn't that tell you that maybe you haven't been as kind to yourself as you could have been? And so it sort of brings up all this stuff, and it's a really quick way to see if you've been living a life of integrity. In other words, if you've been honest and true to yourself, or if maybe you'd like to make some changes and start living life a little bit more on your own terms and a little bit less people pleasing and blah, blah, blah. So it's a really effective way of getting in touch with yourself and what you actually think about yourself. And then from that position, it's a lot easier to then say, do I think this relationship is good or not for me? Because I think a lot of the time, like I said before, I think a lot of people are not happy in their relationship, but they're too afraid to leave. And maybe if you even got them drunk a little bit and said, hey, do you think your relationship is good for you? They'd be like, no, I really don't. And then you say, why don't you leave? I can't. Like I can't leave for whatever reason. I can't leave. That's how I felt for years. But I think if you practice, or I've seen with enough coaching clients now and myself and with you and friends and stuff, if you do this mirror therapy every day and start to almost fall in love with yourself and the person that's in the mirror, you're in a better position to then be able to say, I'm not happy in this relationship, or I'm not happy with this sex, or I'm not happy with the BDSM or whatever. I think I want to improve it or leave. I want something a little bit better or a little bit more in line with me and my values and what I actually want. And that does take a little bit of practice. This is or can be an intimidating exercise, but it's a beautiful one.
And the beautiful thing is that when you spend more time working on yourself, it's not just like sex and relationships where you get more clarity. It really is everything. Like it's so much easier to make decisions and be guided by what truly makes you happy, whether that's in your career, with family, friends, as we said, relationships, in any number of things. If you just get in touch with yourself, get better at asking yourself what you want and asking what makes you happy, decisions just seem to unfold naturally.
And another question to start asking yourself when you're trying to figure out if a relationship or if a sexual dynamic is good for you is, do I feel like my partner would be okay without me? So you're basically doing the opposite of what we've been doing with the mirror therapy. Mirror therapy is about you trying to figure out if you are okay on your own, like as a whole complete person. This is a question of, do I think my partner is a whole complete person, or are working towards being a whole complete person? Because, we're all born imperfect, you could say, and we're trying to improve a little bit at a time. So that's fine. But do I feel like my partner would be okay without me? Or do I feel like they're extremely needy, like they need me? And if they're needy, that's okay. You can give them the Byron Katie book of I Need Your Love. Is that true? That's a really good starting place, and maybe encourage their own independence, their own self-improvement. There's been times I've been really needy with you. There's been times you've been really needy with me, and we've put the burden of happiness on each other. That's okay. You can still improve that, but that's a really good question. Do I feel like my partner would be okay without me? And if you go through this and try and improve or encourage their independence, but they resist, and if you then feel like they're putting all the burden of their own happiness on you, then maybe you can ask yourself, is this actually adding to my life?
Yeah, or do I feel like I'm doing this for them, like doing a service for them at the cost of myself? Because
Yeah.
generally speaking, if you are somebody that's sensing that another person needs you and they're relying on you and they're trying to get something out of you, that's generally not a super fulfilling dynamic where you feel loved and that you're actually benefiting from the relationship. It more, I think over time can start feeling like a job where maybe initially it can feel nice to be needed and wanted and loved in some ways, but as that wears on, I think there's a lot of burden, as I said before, to be somebody's whole world basically. And that's I know you've touched on it quite a few times now when you talk about like the Disney fairy tale. And I think another one that gets said a lot is like you're my other half. Like I'm not whole without you. And I think
You complete me, is what people say.
yeah, that idea that again that the needing somebody else, it can really be detrimental. And I think one of the things that sometimes you can keep people in relationships longer than
They want to.
yeah, because there's a sense that the other person won't be okay or something bad will happen
I
to
can't break
them.
up with them because they won't be okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Or I can't break up with them because I won't be okay.
and coming back to self-love, like it's not a very loving act to yourself to be with someone purely for them because
It's not loving to them either.
mm,
You're trying to be loving to them, but you are just enabling their neediness, and it doesn't feel good. And if you have a relationship where one or both people feel like they need each other, that is a relationship built on guilt and shame. Like, I feel guilty if I leave or if I even think about leaving. They're sort of, without meaning to, shaming you and wanting you to stay. Like, I won't be okay if you leave, and or maybe you feel like you won't be okay. It's a relationship built on fear, like fear of what happens if they're not in my life, what happens if something happens to them, what happens if they cheat on me, what happens if they leave or if I leave, will they be okay?
mm.
And it's not one based on gratitude and love and just a joy to see each other each day because you don't need anything. And if you build a relationship on, what we talk about on the channel a lot, a relationship built on independence and self-love and self-reliance and self-improvement and all of that kind of stuff, you then don't need the other person. And they can be a beautiful bonus to your life that you can be grateful for every day because you don't tell yourself the lie of, I need you. Please don't leave me. I'll be fucked if you leave me. No. Instead, if you build a relationship built on independence and self-love, where both people are independent and they love themselves, you come together and you add to each other's lives. You're a bonus instead of a burden.
And around the topic of being controlling or feeling like your partner is trying to get something from you, a great question to ask yourself as well can be, does your partner stop you from being you? Is your partner somebody that wants you to be more like the way that they want you to be, which means that you're not doing the things that you like, that you're actually passionate about, the things that you care about? Like if you do get in touch with your true self and you don't feel like that's being
Respected,
yeah, not being nurtured,
valued, yeah,
that can be
encouraged.
a signal that maybe the relationship isn't benefiting you.
Basically, does your partner care about who you want to be? And do they encourage you to be that person? Or do they encourage you to be more of who they want to be and they don't really care who you want to be? And then the same standard sort of can apply to you. Like, are you pretty respectful and encouraging of who your partner wants to be and how they want to grow and who they want to evolve into? So basically, do you both support each other on your independent missions, which is why we talk about independence all the time and focusing on your own self-love and not relying on someone else. And what can really help with all of this is getting really clear about who you are and who you want to be.
Another really, really great question is just simply, what do I want? A lot of understanding about whether a relationship is good for you is really just getting clear about what you want. What do you want out of a relationship? What is it that you're seeking? What do you want from a partner? And asking yourself if that's being met by the relationship, by your partner.
And who do you want to be? And is the relationship adding to that or supporting that mission? Again, is the other person and is this relationship helping you build you? And are you helping them build them? You can kind of ask yourself the question of what do I want constantly all throughout the day, almost like a mantra. And you can get to a point where it becomes how you live your life. You literally just live your life according to like, what do I want? What do I want to do? Someone's asking me to do something. Do I want to do that? Rather than just, oh, I should say yes because otherwise I'll feel guilty. And so getting a little bit more clear on what you want, and then learning how to sort of stand up for your own boundaries and enforce them. And some books that help with this is I Need Your Love, Is That True? When I Say No, I Feel Guilty. No More Mr. Nice Guy, which applies to women as well. Women benefit from that book. But basically just learning how to go for what you want and ask yourself what you want and live a life that's authentic and true to you.
That one question, I use it so often throughout my day, all the time when it comes to so many different things, because it does cut through all the bullshit. I will often second guess like whether I should be going to a commitment because I have all of these beliefs around I should keep my word and do the things that I say
I
I'm
have
going
to
to
be a good
do.
friend and I should go to this commitment and blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
Yeah, or even like, should I be going to the gym? I know it's good for me. My body would probably benefit from it. But if I actually just ask myself, what do I want? The solution comes very clearly. And sometimes executing on that solution can be a little bit challenging and it comes with its own guilt or challenges or difficulties, but it at least gives me clarity as to what, again, what it comes back down to. It's self-explanatory. What do I want to be doing?
What do I want?
And I guess a way that that's played out in like in our relationship, even in really simple things of you asking, like, would you like to spend some time together today? Would you like to record a podcast together today? And if it's not an immediate yes, it's often that I'm having all of these mixed feelings. There's like, oh, it would be good for the business. I'm sure it would help Andy out a lot. He does so much for me. I'd like to help him too. But often that confusion or that hesitation or the weird feelings comes from like, I have all of these thoughts, but if I check in with myself and ask, what do I want to do today? It's like, I actually don't really feel like doing
Yeah, I
that.
don't want to do that.
I
Yeah.
just believe or I have the thoughts that I should, even though I don't
Should.
want to, or
Yep.
that I should want to do something different, funnily enough. But
Yeah, there can be a lot of like guilt tripping around your own wants as well. You might ask yourself the question, what do I want? Well, I think I actually don't want to spend time with this partner, but I should. I'd be a bad person if I broke up with them. I should stay with them. I really should be more loyal.
yeah, I shouldn't want that.
Yeah. And it's about untangling that and letting go of the shoulds and just asking yourself very clearly, what do I want? And you can do this, you can pair this with mirror therapy. If you go into the bathroom or wherever there's a mirror and look into your own eyes and then try saying, what do I want? It can be a lot easier to answer that question because you don't feel like you have all the thoughts and other people's opinions and all of that. It's just you in front of yourself looking into your own eyes saying, all right, kiddo, what do you want or what do I want?
And as we've gotten better at, I guess, giving ourselves what we want, asking for what we want in the relationship, and also being accepting when the other person does what they want in the relationship, we've actually found that this has made us so much more loving with each other. We have
Oh,
so much
yeah.
more to give because we're not doing things for the most part, and we're not perfect with it, but we're not doing things out of resentment and frustration. And there's less of those moments where you get shitty with each other because you haven't spent a week doing lots of things that you don't want to do for their sake and then telling that story and feeling that resentment and then ultimately actually having no genuine heartfelt love to give because you've just been frustrated by doing things you don't want to do. But if 99% of your day you're doing things that you want to be doing that recharge you, that fuel you, you're going to have so much more love to give.
Yeah, we've said this a million times in content. We don't believe in or we choose not to ever make sacrifices for each other. We don't make compromises in the relationship because if we do that, then that builds resentment. We instead give ourselves the things that we're wanting from the other partner. We try our best to never control each other, and we're pretty good at that now. We were not good at that at the start. That took us a lot of years of practice of letting go of controlling behavior and stuff like that. But because we can be there for ourselves and love ourselves, we then have nothing but gratitude for each other because we've handled our own needs and we've done what we wanted, not what we thought we should or had to or must do. You can also ask yourself the question of who you want to be in general, what kind of person you want to be, what impact you want to have on the world, how you want to treat the people around you, maybe some of the values or the principles or the ideals that are important to you, what your goals are. In other words, who is your future self? Who is future you? And then after each person that you date, or maybe every sex session you have, or if it's BDSM, after every BDSM session, you basically ask yourself, did this or did this person help me get closer to my future self? Are they fitting in, or does this sex or this relationship fit in with me being my authentic self? And you can sort of ask yourself, does the other person listen to me? Do they take into account my desires and my wants? Are they helping me move towards that future self that I want to be? Or is this relationship or this like sexual encounter almost entirely them just getting whatever they want and not really giving a shit or not caring at all if I benefit or if I ever get what I want? Basically, are they just like taking, and they don't really care if I'm happy? Like, if I happen to be happy, then whatever, they don't care. But if I'm unhappy, they really don't care. They're like, I don't care. I'm getting what I want. So, do they care about me and my needs and what I want? And are they helping me facilitate, or are they facilitating me being the best me that I can be?
That was very poetic. The best me that I can be. It's also worth flipping this question on yourself as well, and maybe looking internally and asking, are their needs being met as well? Like, as much as, like, am I getting what I want? Am I helping facilitate them getting what they want as well? Like, am I maybe the one that is more controlling or wanting to get something out of my partner? I think it can be really helpful to ask the question both ways around.
Yeah, and if you feel like you're controlling or your partner is, or you feel like you're not really giving much to them or they're not really giving much to you, like we said, that's okay. You can just improve that. That can be something that you improve over time. Or maybe you decide you want to leave and go be single or go be with someone else or whatever. There are no like one size fits all answers to these sort of questions. The whole point of this podcast was to sort of get you thinking a little bit with some questions to start asking yourself if you're even wondering if a relationship is good for you or not, or a sexual encounter or a BDSM act or something that you're doing is helping you or hindering you.
Yeah, a general philosophy that we've been embracing since very, very early on, when we met each other, was are we working towards being on the same team? And what we mean by on the same team is basically just treating each other as people that we can go to when we're unsure about something, not pushing them away, not trying to mind read or guess what they're thinking, simply just going to them if you are unsure about something or are having doubts or insecurities or whatever it might be, just trusting that you're here to support each other. They're not the enemy, and it doesn't need to be something like a fight that you have to win.
Yeah, I say this all the time. I say this to men. I say this to women. I say this to gay people and freaking everyone. You can have it so that your partners, everyone that you ever date or sleep with or do BDSM or whatever, is your teammate. And so if you're ever unsure of anything, you can ask them. If you're ever having doubts about something, you can tell them. And so you're basically saying, do I feel like my partner here is on a mission with me, like we're two people working towards a mission or working towards a common good, like we're both building something together? Even if all you're building is just let's have really fun, fulfilling sex together, do I basically feel like this person wants my life to be better and I want their life to be better, and then together we come together and make something really beautiful? But if you get the sense that maybe your partner treats you a little bit like the enemy, or maybe you treat them like the enemy, you can improve that for sure. But maybe you want to also just leave and say, hey, I'm going to go find someone that wants to be a little bit more honest or a little bit more all in, or they want to improve or they care about me, whatever it might be. And on a similar note, I think honesty's got to be a big one. Like if you're trying to figure out whether or not a relationship or a sex act or a partner or whatever is good for you, are they honest? Can you guys be honest with each other? Will they just tell you what's on their mind? Or do you feel like you're always trying to pull the truth out of them, or sometimes they just hide it, they lie? Have you ever caught them in a whole bunch of like big lies? I think honesty is such a key component of like a relationship being good for you, so to speak.
And a final question that has really, really helped us, asking, is my partner willing to listen to what I want? Are they willing to grow the relationship with me? Basically, is my partner willing to change and evolve and adapt and improve and basically just work on this stuff with me? Or are they very fixed? Are they very rigid in their beliefs and their ideas, and they're not really wanting to change anything? Do they feel kind of stagnant? Because I assume that if you are somebody that's watching this, there's at least some desire to learn and grow or deepen a connection or improve something. And that willingness to change requires both people in the relationship to be on board, to be on this, to be on the same team, to be in it together.
Yeah, and to be very clear, this isn't us saying change your partner. We're not talking about like changing someone or making them do something that they don't want to do. But what we're referring to here is if there's some part of the relationship or some part of the sex that you guys are having that you feel is not making you happy or you're not really comfortable with, do they want to improve that? Are they willing to even listen and entertain that conversation? Like, do they want you to be a more happy, more fulfilled, more peaceful, more loving and loved person over time? Or do you get the sense that they just don't really care? And maybe you say to them or you make it clear to them that you're not happy, but they're just not really interested. So basically, are they willing? And do they want those things for themselves too? Like, how is their self-esteem? Everything that we've talked about in this video today, you can kind of apply to them and say, do they have some self-love? Do they want to improve their life? Are they into self-improvement? Are they independent? Do they want their life to be better over time? And if you get the sense that no, they just want to be miserable and they're kind of into self-sabotage and they hurt themselves a lot and being around them kind of drags you down, then maybe it's worth reaching out to someone else and saying, do you think this relationship is good for me? Because I'm trying to figure it out and I get the sense that maybe it's not. And something that you can do to sort of build that feeling of you both being on the same team and improving and all of that is what we call weekly accountability check-ins. And this is maybe more for a serious relationship, but you can do it in a casual relationship. You sort of check in once a week and you see if you're both happy. You will push yourself with your own individual goals. You'll build the relationship and build the goals in the relationship. Again, even a casual one. That's a really nice way of like building something and improving something. And so the question that you're sort of asking yourself here is, do I feel like me and the other person is willing to improve and make things better over time? And even just in the context of just casual sex or BDSM hookups or something, basically, do they want to improve the sex over time? Do they want me to be happier over time? Do I want them to be happier over time? Basically, do they care about me being happy? And do I care about them being happy? And what you're really asking yourself here, as you said before, is does the other person have a growth mindset? Or are they kind of stuck where they are and maybe they're unhappy and they're just stuck there and they don't want to make any progress with anything? Basically, are you and they learning and growing as a person as a consequence of being together, even in a casual relationship? Tony Robbins, the famous motivational speaker, has said that progress is the thing that makes human beings happy and brings meaning to our lives. And I agree with this wholeheartedly. Progress is the thing that I have seen in my clients, in my friends, in everyone, in myself that makes them happy. And so you can ask, is there progress in this relationship or this casual hookup? And do I feel like my life is improving and their life is improving?
And I guess to summarize up everything that we've been saying, there's so many questions that you can ask yourself. There's really no right or wrong way to go about figuring out whether a relationship is good for you. That can be with the support of family, friends, therapists. It just could be getting in touch with yourself, improving your own self-esteem. That could be having a conversation with your partner. Like, there's infinite ways to approach it, and certain questions are probably going to resonate better with you. And it's going to be your own journey to figure out whether something is or is not right for you. All of this could really just be summed up with the one question, and the only one that really matters, which is, what do I want?
Whatever your goals might be, whether that's money, relationships, sex and dating, fitness, health, friendships, whatever, we are here to help you make those beautiful goals come to life. Ed did it. Taylor did it. Harry did it. None of them are special. If you're listening to this, you know you're capable of more than you're currently giving. You already want something more than what everybody else around you seems to be content with. You want to achieve more, be more, give more to the world. You know it, and I know it. You're destined for something beautiful. Click the link to the coaching in the description below and let us help you get there. Happiness starts today.